Fantastic.
Namaste,
Thanks for the
everybody.
reminder.
And it's lovely to be back here again. And again, my thanks to Oshwal Association for organizing this. So I'm going to start with a quick recap, and then we can go into some practicalities about how to do some of the things that I'm saying. So last week we talked about this physical body. This physical body in my case is called Mehool, and it's a physical body, but it's temporary. And I know that, you know that, everybody knows that, but we kind of live as if it was permanent. And one of the reasons for that is that the senses that we have, especially sight and sound, is what we live by. I mean, how many times have you heard you are, if you see it, you believe it, or you hear something, you see something, and that becomes your reality. So we believe that these senses are absolutely real, and that everything they see and do is absolutely true. On the other hand, we are also, we believe, a soul. And this soul is nothing but energy, consciousness, but it's permanent. And what gives this body life. And at the end of this life, it'll go into another body and give that body life. And it's something that we cannot see. And this is where our first hurdle becomes, that the belief that we have this soul, this energy, this consciousness, is what makes us Jain. That is what Jainism actually is, this belief in your soul. And the purpose of the Jain faith is simple: to move you from acting like you are this body to moving you to become the soul and act like you're the soul. That is the whole purpose of Jainism. And when you think about that, it's logical, because we're moving from something that is temporary and permanent, to something that is permanent. If you think about this body and everything that it has, all the identities, a lot of people identify with their job. It becomes their identity, but at some point they retire, and so that job is temporary. If you think about a house, and my house, you move, that goes. Everything that is in our lives physically is temporary, and so the idea of moving to permanence is what we are all achieving or trying to achieve. The issue with that is that there is no prescription. And the reason there is no prescription, there's no formula, there's no ritual, there's no path, is because we all have different amounts of karma. So we have no idea how much we have to get through in order to get to that place. And so this is the biggest hurdle we face. So we have to believe that we're not this physical body, and then we don't know how long it's going to take for us to realize the soul that we're in. One of the questions I had after the last session was, when we think about kindness, is that a Jain principle or is it a humanitarian principle? So that's a very good question, because what happens in our lives, all of our lives, is that we look at things that we see and hear and taste and touch outside of us, and we give them meaning. So let me explain that to you. If you have children who are at school, and that child does well in its exams, that gives you happiness. But it might give somebody else sadness because they're jealous, because their child didn't do so well. So the happiness and the sadness hasn't come from the child. It's coming from us. We're giving meaning to those events. We're interpreting them and saying that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. And we only have a partial view of it, yet we associate, the happiness we feel or the sadness to it. So what we're in essence doing is making these things our proxies, the reason that we suffer and the reason that we are happy. And in reality, our suffering and our happiness is actually more in our mind than in reality. But we take that, and that becomes the way our life goes. Some are good days, some are bad days, and so on. if we were able to move that happiness within us, inside of us, then it would not depend on anything that happened outside of us. And in that way, our happiness would be permanent. So if you think about that in terms of kindness, when we're kind, we're normally kind to people who are less fortunate than we are. And we do charity, we give money, we do seva, we do other things. Typically, not always, but typically for people less fortunate. And that is, we see that as a good act that we do. What I'm saying is that this idea of kindness should be your personality. It should be who you are, regardless of the situation. And it's not an easy thing, but what it means is that your attitude towards being kind doesn't change by the events that you see or hear and so on. It doesn't matter, because those are, in many ways, things that are happening outside of you. Now, you might say, why is that possible? Well, if you think about what we were saying last time, that when you think about this idea of karma, and karma for us is extremely important because it's what keeps us in this cycle of birth and death. When you think about this idea of karma, karma doesn't come with a name on it. It doesn't have somebody's identity with it. All it is good or bad, depending on what you do, what you think, what you say, how you behave. So if you are unkind because you don't like something you see, or you have this, strong dislike, that unkindness just becomes karma that you bind. And so the idea is that you should be thinking positively and being positive regardless of the situation. And the reason for that, which I'll come on to shortly, but I'll tell you briefly now, is that in most events, whatever happens at any moment, when we then start looking at it, back in time, in retrospect, after some time has passed, those things, become less important. And normally we conclude that whatever happened for the best. But our reaction at that time can't be changed. So if you trust what is going on, and you trust the fact that whatever is happening to you is happening for the best, but you do not see it at this moment, it'll become apparent a bit later on, then the idea of being positive and kind and happy should be something that is in your nature, regardless of what is happening outside. Now, again, that might seem, something that's extremely difficult to do, but think of it in this way, that if that's going to happen anyway, in a year, you're going to look back and say, maybe I overreacted, it wasn't very much, and now it's worked out for the best. The fact that you overreacted means it'll happen again. So this idea of things happening again and again and again is nothing but an indication that you are reacting to them, and that reaction is rebinding that karma. So with that introduction in mind, what I would like to do is talk a little bit for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then we'll move to questions, but talk a little bit about how you can look at these things from a positive angle, and how you can form habits that will actually change this. Now, again, I'm not saying they're easy, but what I'm saying is that if you form these habits, I can assure you of one thing: your life will completely change, because what it will do is move you into a direction that you're probably not in at the moment. Okay? So the first is this idea of discipline. Nothing in this life will happen without discipline. And by discipline, I mean doing the same things at the same time every day, so that they become your habit. They become the way that, if you're going to wake up at 6 in the morning and do a half an hour of yoga, do it. Don't say, oh, it's cold outside and I'm just going to turn over and have another half an hour of sleep. Keep getting up and you'll see the benefit. The day you stop, it'll probably mean you stop for a few more days, and that benefit quickly disappears. So that discipline is something that is effectively you investing in yourself. And why is that important? Because that is the only way you are going to progress in this life. And you'll find that anything that you do to invest in yourself in private will actually give you huge benefits in public. Okay, whether it's you're learning a musical instrument, whether you're learning to meditate, whether you're learning Jain philosophy, whether you're learning yoga, you'll find that that is always the case. When you think about discipline, I mean, think about the person who invented the light bulb, Thomas Edison. He tried 3,000 times before he invented the light bulb, 3,000. And if you asked him at the time, he would tell you, I found 3,000 ways not to invent a light bulb, but I found one that works. And that sort of attitude is what you need. Why? Just think about this, that if something that you're doing isn't working, why isn't it working? And the answer, like everything else I've talked about, is to do with karma. That your karma is preventing you, antray, it's called. It's basically blocking you from achieving what you want. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you need discipline and tenacity. You have to keep going. You can't stop. And something will happen because that karma is controlling your environment, your circumstances, and what you're doing. If you give up at any point, the karma wins and it's still there and it'll still happen. The point that you break through that resistance is the point that you've overcome it. And you will find that when you overcome those sorts of things, everything thereafter becomes so much easier because you have overcome it. But it means that you have to keep going. And you see this with people who, are entrepreneurs, people who are doing new kinds of technology and whatever. They keep going and going and going. The ones that win are the ones that don't give up. So in that scenario, if you think about this idea of overcoming the karma within you, the things that are blocking you doing what you want to do, that is actually your discipline. That you keep going, that you do the same things. If you're learning a language, do it daily. You'll learn it quickly. If you're learning religion, again, this idea of doing it every week means that it becomes embedded in you. So let me give you an example around this. If you think about something that really worried you when you were young, or something that really troubled you and you didn't know how to cope with it, and it was, my world is coming to an end type of moment. When you look back at it now, after 10 years or 15 years or whatever it is, you will look back and say, it wasn't that big a deal, and whatever's happened has happened for the best. And that's true of almost every situation. When you think about that, what does that tell you? That basically everything will work out because that is the nature of reality. However, in that process, the things that stop it or delay it are your lack of discipline, are your negative thoughts and views, and is this idea of, looking at everything with fear and with intrepidation and with anxiety and all of those things. So you are creating your own obstacles to this path that is there naturally, and you would have otherwise gone through and fulfilled it. And when you think about that, think about it from a really practical way, that the idea is about learning lessons in life. When you do something and there is a lesson and you learn that lesson, the next time it's unlikely to happen because you know what's going to happen, you know how to handle it, and you move forward. So all these things that happen to you are there to give you a learning of something or the other. And when you've learned it, you become less fearful, you become less anxious, and you actually, carry on going further and further down this thing. Now, let me give you a simple example. So you're walking along a beach, and there's a beautiful sunset, and the sea is coming in gently, and idyllic setting, you're kind of living the dream. But as the sea starts coming in, if you don't know how to swim, that's a source of anxiety. Should I go out a bit? If it comes in strongly, it might pull me in. And what is a dream situation becomes an anxious situation. The day you learn how to swim, that thought doesn't even come into your mind. So putting the discipline in and investing in yourself and learning how to build the skill actually means that you'd never face that problem again. And that problem is the same with everything else that happens. If everything that happens becomes a source of learning for you and you figure out how to handle it, how to do it, you will find as life progresses, you're able to do bigger and better things because you've figured out how to do the lesser things. But that means investing in yourself. So, I'll give you an example of Bhagwan Mahavir again, that when he took Diksha, it took him 12 years of meditation to get to a point where he achieved his Keval Gnan, where he got his omniscience. 12 years. So these things are not easy because what we're striving for is not easy. But if you carry on and persist with it, at some point you will overcome the karma and it gives you the fruit. Okay? So that was number one, which is discipline. Number two is the idea of building awareness. Awareness because in life we are, we have our five senses, but they're very limited. If you're looking at a room, you cannot see beyond the walls. You cannot see things that are not in front of you. Even if they're in front of you, if like me, you wear glasses, what you see might not be in, 4D or 4K resolution. All of these things are issues that we have with, what we've been given. If on top of that, we add other things that distract us, how many people, when I came back today from central London, I looked up and down the carriage and almost everybody had earphones on. Everybody was sitting, watching something on a mobile phone, totally unaware of what was happening around them. Now, you might say, well, it was just a bit of entertainment sitting on a train, but that becomes a habit. And that habit means that you're so distracted, you stop seeing everything that is in front of you. And in most cases, I will tell you that when I'm faced with a problem, the answer is always in front of me. It's always there, but we don't see it. We're not, sharp enough, focused enough, and so on. And this is something that you see that, again, giving you an example, if you think about those who are further ahead than us, monks, nuns, etc. One of the things they have to do in terms of their vows is have absolute awareness of everything they do, standing and sitting, collecting food, sleeping on their bed, walking. Everything they do is done consciously. And that consciousness improves the focus of your mind. And that focus allows you to see things clearly. And again, if you want to move forward, you have to step away from the distraction and be conscious of everything that is happening around you. This will build your intuition. And your intuition, if you listen to it, if you're able to tune into it, will always tell you if situations feel right or feel wrong, if people feel right or wrong. All of these things you become really aware of if you know how to become aware of them. But again, this is something we tend not to do. So number two is awareness. Number three is this idea of building a positive mindset, a positive outlook to life. When you think about anything that happens in life, this idea of anekant, that we only see one-sidedness, we don't see the multi-sidedness of anything, means that we look at things from the perspective of, this is good, this is bad, this is something they've said to me, this is something they've said about me. When you start thinking like that, remember that with anything outside of you, you only have a very limited view of that. You have no idea if a person is angry that they've had a lot of other things that have happened to them. You have no idea whether they've suffered a loss. All you see is, they're being angry towards me. How can they behave that way? And this is a very standard way for us to react, but we do it based on the limited things we can see and hear and do. That again has the attitude or the effect, that attitude has the effect that it basically keeps you in that small-mindedness. And I say small-mindedness because to become big-minded in this sense, you have to have this understanding that when something happens, you say, well, I don't understand the full story. I don't understand the reality of this. But when I do, I'll have a better understanding of what has happened. But you don't react negatively. And what that will do is it will mean that you are, in most cases, becoming a very positive and kinder person. Now, let me give you an example of this. That if you have anger within you, you have karma of anger, okay? Because you've been angry in the past at somebody, you've shouted, you screamed. So this anger is sitting inside of you. How does that anger exhibit itself? How do you suffer anger? What happens is that the karma rises and gives you the feeling of anger in your mind. How often do you hear people say, look, I'm feeling uptight, I'm feeling a bit anxious, just leave me alone for a while. That feeling of being angry is your karma that is rising. If you then use that by finding something to become angry at, you become angry. There are two big differences here. Feeling angry and being angry, not the same thing. One is your karma, and one is your mind interacting with that karma, and your body then exhibiting that anger, whether it's in speech or in thought or in word or in deed, whatever it is. So if that is the case, then most times when something happens, always become conscious that this is more about me than the other person. If you have a little, a little baby or a small child, that child can do the same thing on 2 different days. On one day, you'll just laugh it off and say, he's a child or she's a child, this is what they do. And on another day, you'll get angry because, they've just made a mess and you want to go out. It's the same thing, both days. The difference is the karma that is rising within you. It is not that child. But you need something to get angry at. So what you need to do is swap that over. Every time you get angry, just think that whatever it is you're getting angry at is not the source. You are the source. If you start to do that, what it will do is get this idea of having anger, hatred, jealousy, pride out of you, and you will become a calmer person. Once you become a calmer person, you will start to see life in all its glory, all its realities. And you will find that in most cases, there's no point to this anger or hatred because whatever is happening is out of your control anyway. So again, the idea with this is that if you are more aware of yourself, more aware of your actions, when you start to feel these things coming up within you, what will happen is you'll become more aware that you are having these feelings, and you will find a way to pull away and stop them. Whether that is jealousy or greed or whatever it is, all of these are not you. They're the feelings that your karma is giving you because at some point you did something to bind them. Okay, so that's the next one. Okay, then the couple that we see, in Jainism quite a lot. One is the idea of being grateful. Grateful means that you stop leading a life of comparison. This is not a competition of you versus anybody else. This is your personal journey. This is your path, and your path is dictated to by your circumstances, your family, your karma. So the idea that you have to be like the next person, you have to have a house like the next person, a car like the next person, all of these things always lead to resentment. Because when it happens, it's a sense of pride. And when it doesn't happen, there's resentment. The moment you learn that your path is your own and it doesn't matter. Those people will not give you or see you in any different light, because today they'll be your friends, tomorrow they won't, somebody else will be. So if you lead your life in your own way, you will achieve something which is absolutely critical: contentment. If you become content, if you become the sort of person who doesn't matter where they are, is happy, is content, whether you're in a 5-star hotel or you're in a dhaba having food, you're happy that you're having food, full stop. You will become happy irrespective of what is happening to you. So to build this contentment, you need one quality, and that quality is acceptance. You must accept, this is my situation. Why is it my situation? Because it's my karma. This is where I am. I'm going to put the effort to go from here to here. I'm going to put the energy to, do what I can, but this is where I am. If you accept that, that becomes the start of your journey. Because at that point, you have recognized you're following your own path. If you carry on this idea of always looking elsewhere and always thinking, this is more expensive than that, this is better than that, I wish I had done that. What you're living is a life outside of you as a person. That life is not your journey. That is your mind, basically playing with passion. If you want happiness and you want contentment and you want peace, this is the way to do it. Be grateful for what you have, because if you really want to compare yourself with the 90% of people who don't have enough food, don't have shelter over their head, don't get water on a tap whenever they want it, can't go out and buy food, don't have a credit card, etc., etc. That's the reality in most of the world. What we tend to do is compare with the couple of percent that we see slightly higher than us. And that is the source of your suffering, because you will never find contentment. As soon as you reach that person, there'll be somebody slightly higher. And this is always the case. So that's number 4, gratefulness. Number 5 is what we do at the end of Paryushan, which is to say Michami Dukram, forgiveness. You should learn to forgive everybody and everything in every situation. Because if you think about any situation, everything that you feel is wrong is not somebody else. It's you using somebody else as the reason to label this as wrong, and therefore suffer the consequences in your mind. So if somebody is shouting at me, and I sit there and say, how dare they shout at me? Who do they think they are? And then I've got this thing in my mind that, how dare he shout at me? And I just repeats again and again and again. He may have been shouting at me because he's partially deaf, and that's the only way he knows how to speak. But I've made a drama out of that. It sits in my mind, it keeps going round and round. Then I have to tell 3 or 4 people, how rude, I can't believe people are like this, and so on. Where has all that suffering happened? In my mind. All that tension, all that blood pressure, all that cholesterol, whatever else you get out of this. If you think, poor man, he's obviously not a happy person, Michami Dukram, walk on, that's the end of it. And there is nothing more. So the idea of forgiveness, although we think of it as something we do to other people, in reality, forgiveness is what we do for ourselves. And that is very important, because what it means is that your baggage, your grudges, your memory, all of those things that basically are going on in your mind don't have anything to feed on. You're not putting more in. And I always say to people that when they're in Paryushan, what happens is that they're happy to go and say Mitami Dukram, or kamau to people they know and like. Go and say to the people you don't like, the ones you don't talk to, the ones you've got an issue with, the ones you struggle with, and then see how much lighter you walk out of that hole. You'll fly out of that hole. Because what you have done is been the bigger person and drawn a line. Whatever you may have done, I forgive you. End of story. If you do that, there's no grudge to carry on because you've forgiven them. There's no memory, there's no baggage. You know, they said that way, it doesn't matter. I'm beyond it. Move on. And if you can do this, again, what it does is that it means that you're, you know, going on a path. You're not dragging things along with you. You know, this path, and I don't mean a religious path, I mean this human path, is actually a very difficult path. You know, as you live through life, you find that life is a constant challenge of one thing after another. If you're able to manage that challenge through an attitude of acceptance, through an attitude of being grateful for whatever you have, and an attitude of forgiving everybody because it is you, not them, that path becomes a lot easier. Because as a person, you don't have things. It's a bit, you know, it's a bit like when people say, if you throw enough mud at a wall, something will stick. If you become like Teflon, that nothing sticks, people can say and do whatever they want, but you're always, you know, happily going along. In that, the frustration becomes theirs, not yours. You're always the happier person. Okay? So in this, I'm going to, we've got 10, 15 minutes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something else, and then if there are questions, happy to take them. So last time we talked about this idea of a mind and the idea of your brain or the activity. This mind is something that is within you, that is, think of it as the interface between your body and your soul. Your soul, if it wants to achieve something physical, needs your physical body to do it because it's physical particles, it's physical matter, okay? So if you have to suffer bodily pain, it needs a body. If you have bound karma that gives you a royal life, you need a life in a royal family. So this physical entity is nothing more than your karma achieving what it needs to. So how does it do it? Apart from the physical body and the family and the environment you have, everything else happens through this interface between your body and the soul, which is your mind. So when you get thoughts, and the title of this was You Are What You Think, those thoughts are not thoughts. They are karma coming up into your mind. So why is it that sometimes you're just sitting there and a thought will come to you? Where does it come from? You know, remember, there's nothing random in this universe. It's a very ordered universe. That thought is the positive or negative karma coming up into your mind and then giving you that feeling or that. So if the thought is of your summer holiday and you're imagining lying on a beach somewhere in Mombasa, that becomes a very happy thought. But that happiness and that thought came from somewhere, and that was your positive karma giving you happiness. Similarly, you can feel sadness. Now, those thoughts are there, as I said, because of your karma. When that thought comes, if you engage with it, so you start daydreaming about this holiday and you start, you know, doing kind of in your mind scenarios of what you're going to do and places you're going to go and what you're going to eat and so on, your happiness might continue, but what you're doing is rebinding the same karma. And you might say, well, that's good karma, so why does that matter? Because it matters because when you're in daydream mode, you rarely discriminate between the two. When the bad karma comes, you will also have those thoughts and ideas, and that's why the thing that happens in your mind becomes your reality. Because most of the time you live there in those thoughts and your daydreams. If you don't learn to control them through some of the things that I've just said, what it will start to do is put two things in your mind, and we call them Artha Dhyan and Rodra Dhyan. So one is about feeling sorry for yourself when you think about the past. If I had said this, if I had done that, if I'd been like this, if I'd answered like that, it might have been different. And so you keep thinking of that past and you keep feeling sorry for yourself. Well, let me tell you a reality. There are, whatever it is, 30, 40 people on this call. At the end of this, if you ask every one of them what I said, their answers will be different. If you then ask them to say a bit more, they will start filling the blanks that they didn't hear with their imagination. Okay? That is your mind. A few real bits of reality with large bits of imagination in between. So if that's the case, where does this reality exist? Only in your mind, because everybody else's recollection is very different. So what you're sitting there feeling sorry about is nothing but an imaginary reality that you have made up of something you remember. It's not real. Similarly, the other thing that happens is you have anxiety about what's going to happen in the future. And you have this thing of, if you think something is going to stop you or prevent you or whatever, you almost have this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this. So your past and your future is where most of your mind goes. And this is why most things I've said to you is about disciplining that mind, right? Now, if you're thinking about the future, again, where is that? It's in your mind. It hasn't happened yet. Your imagination is all the things you think, the worst things that could really happen. And then you look at the reality. And if you really want to try this, get a book. Next time you have this thought about what the future is going to be like, write it down, and then see what the reality is when it comes there. It's never as bad as it is in your mind. And so what you are is in a state of anxiety and fear and, those sorts of things, which then mean that the decisions you make, the things you do, are actually influenced heavily by that. But you're being influenced by something that doesn't exist. It's not there yet. And so you've made this thing up in your mind. If you have a vivid imagination, or congratulations, it'll look absolutely real. But you do all the things you don't really need to do to get there. And as a result of that, what then happens is you go through those thoughts, the words, deeds, actions that we talked about last time, and you start to make that a reality to some extent because of the karma that you have created. So that reality wasn't there. It was in your mind, but it became partially real because of what you thought and said and did. If you become a positive person and you say, whatever happens, I'll face it. However bad it is, we'll get through it. There's no fear. In fact, you become a braver person. You will face this and take whatever comes, you accept. So most of what I'm telling you is techniques to actually protect your mind and take control of it. If your mind takes control of you, you will always lead a life of anxiety, fear, depression. If you learn to take control of your mind, you will become a positive, happy person. And in that, what will happen is that the difficulties of this life, they may not go away, but you will be better armed. You'll have more tools to deal with them. And you will, start to build trust in the fact that ultimately your soul is going to get you to where it wants you to go. And you're going to trust this journey. You're going to go along without sitting there, having these thoughts about what could be and what if and how and so on, and just go along with that. And as a result of that, your ability to, accept, to, be content, all of those things become your nature. You become a calm and relaxed person that is content and happy. The last thing that I want to cover is this question which I was asked by somebody, that we talk about these habits, but how do people cultivate these habits otherwise? And so what I thought I'd do is share a little bit about what happens to you if you become a sadhu, a monk. It's very extreme, but I want to show you that these things are the same, whether it's you and me or whether it's a monk or a nun, okay? So the first thing you do as a monk is you take your vows, the 5 vows. And those vows basically become your discipline. You live by those rules, day in, day out for your whole life. The second thing that you do is you start this process of living a very disciplined life. You get up at 4 o'clock or 4:30, you do your reading, your meditation, your whatever. So that discipline starts to discipline your body, starts to discipline your mind, that however lazy you might feel, however I don't feel well, I'm a bit tired, it doesn't matter. You overcome it, you stand up and you do what you need to. Once you get into that habit, nothing can stop you. Really, nothing can stop you. That laziness, that, the procrastination, that I really don't want to do this, doesn't become an objection or a thing that stops you in any way. The third thing is you take vows of basically making sure that in any activity that you do, whether it's eating, walking, sleeping, you are fully conscious of what you are doing. You sweep away insects, you fold things carefully, you sit in the right place, you sleep in the right place. And that means you do nothing in automatic, with your mind thinking about something else. You think about what you're doing and you do it consciously. This starts to discipline your mind. And then the other things that then start to happen, your ability to, react negatively to things diminishes because you start to spend a lot of time in meditation, in, controlling thoughts that come to you, understanding that you can actually release them, let them go. And the last thing is, again, when we talk about this idea of forgiveness and being grateful, in their situation, they will do a pratikaman every day to ask for forgiveness of anything that they've done. So that process, and together with, the idea of begging for food. Why do you beg for food? Because it's the easiest way to destroy your ego. When you have to bend down and ask somebody, can I have some food? You don't actually have much of an ego left after that. You walk barefoot from town to town, village to village, because it removes your fear. You don't know what's coming at the other end. You trust, whatever it is, God, the universe, whatever it is, to keep you safe, because that's your karma. So all of these things are things that people do when they get to that level. If you start practicing them now, you will actually see some of the benefits come through. And in those benefits, the biggest one will be that you're able to face all the challenges that this life will throw at you, and it will. That's its purpose. So if you can, think about these things from that perspective and learn to control your mind and body and thoughts, what you will end up with is a person that's just happier, content, and, free, rather than kind of bound with all these, the baggage and the memories and all of that. If you achieve that, that's the start of your journey from a spiritual perspective. Because from that, everything else becomes open to you. Until then, you're always fighting those things. And in fighting those things, you will always go backwards, because every time you go forwards, the karma that you then bind will take you back to where you were. And that's why you see the same things keep happening to the same people. Let me stop there. It's 5 to 9. So do we have any questions? I'm sure we must do.
I have received one question. We'll just take that first, and then Visual will take your question next.
Okay.
So the question I've received is from Prabhat Shah. He's asking how closely this philosophy, religion of Jainism, is linked to Stoicism.
I don't know enough about Stoicism to answer that, but what I will tell you is that ultimately, we have, you might call it wallpaper, you might call it packaging, but ultimately, and that might be, for example, that if you read the Gita, you will find, mention of God and Krishna and all of these things. In many of the chapters, if you take out the word Krishna and add the word Atma instead, it's not very different, because in reality, the ultimate reality is the same thing. So why do we have a difference? The difference is that Jainism from the outset has always believed in only one thing, which is moksha. If you want to achieve moksha, it is pretty much mandatory that you take vows, you take diksha, you become a monk or a nun. So it is a religion where that is emphasized. And we, when we pray Lokar mantra, apart from the first two, Namo Ariyantanam and Namo Siddhanam, the last three are all monks. Ayaryanam is an acharya, Uvatyayam is an upadhyay, and Sahu is sadhu. So it is the path that we believe in, and it is a difficult path because it is a path that, requires that. Other paths that have normal, this idea of God attached to them are simpler because you have somebody outside of you can pray to and ask for help. It's not about you and yourself. There is somebody there. And so all of these religions depend on this idea of grace, that if you make God happy by, by being devoted and devoting your life and doing these rituals, he'll become happy and help you. So there is a transaction there between you and God. Jainism, there is no God. So the idea is that you have to take responsibility for everything that happens to you and for you. And therefore, it's a much more difficult path. But if you want to give me some examples of Stoicism, then I can comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mehool, and thank you, Prabhat, for a good question. Vijay?
Pranam Jai Jinendra. I wanted to just ask, you mentioned about awareness, and a lot of us are, by joining these things, trying to deepen our knowledge and become more aware. And I wanted to ask, somewhere I learned that we attract or we bind karma if we know something but we don't act on it. So, for example, if you can do an umbel but you still choose not to do it, you bind karma. Or if you know that eating potatoes kills so many beings, but you still eat them, you bind karma. So is it, if you're ignorant and you don't know this, does it absolve you or give you, is it less compared to if you're aware and you still do it?
If ignorance was a way to liberation, then those that are completely uneducated and have never left a village in a rural area and know nothing of the world would be liberated. The reality is, ignorance is never a reason to get out of jail card. Never happens. The ignorance that happens, you see, and think about this from this perspective, that when we talk about the opposite of ignorance, which is liberation, keval gnan, we don't say liberation, we say keval gnan, total knowledge. So total knowledge is your liberation. Ignorance is the exact opposite of that. What happens with knowledge is that knowledge in many ways is dangerous, because once you have knowledge, you know what the right thing to do is. And when you don't do it, you're, in many cases, doing the wrong thing. Now, the reality of this is that, if you think about it from another perspective, this idea of becoming better and more perfect isn't something that happens overnight, not even over a number of years. It takes a long time. And so the idea of acquiring knowledge is that over time, that knowledge changes your conduct and your behavior, because you start discriminating between what is right and wrong. So if you're here at this class today, and however many people are at this class, that is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total number of people out there who follow this religion. So why are there some people here and some not? Because some are now more inspired to come, they want to learn more, they want to, become better and so on. And that's what will happen. Your knowledge affects your conduct. And ultimately in the Jain religion, it is your conduct that is supreme. In the Hindu religion, you have 3 paths to, or 4 paths to God, whether it's devotion, it's karma, whether it's knowledge, and there's another, duty, I think. But in Jainism, there's one path, and out of that, the conduct becomes supreme. And that's why when you look at all of those people following that path that have become monks or nuns, their conduct is what defines the level that they're at, the stage of their conduct, whether it's pure, whether they're causing harm, and so on. So what I would say to you is that when you become conscious of something, and you have to put it into perspective, that eating potatoes is not something that we should do, but it is a lesser sin than killing spiders, for example. So it's about progress. Make progress. You can't really say, well, I don't eat potatoes, but I get angry at everybody I meet and I swear and I shout and so on. So you're actually doing wrong to a 5 cents being, but you're happy saving a 1 cent being. You have to start putting that into perspective. But as you improve, you will find that these things aren't things you are forced to do. They actually become natural. It's not that you'll get up one day and say, oh, this is not the right thing. You'll just not want to do it because in your mind it's set that, I should stop doing this now. Or it's set that I should read every week, or I should attend this class. And these things become a part of you because as you gain the knowledge, they become part of your conduct, part of your activity. Does that make sense?
It does, but I still, I guess the gap in my mind is there's a difference between being aware and trying, even if you don't get there, you're still trying, or knowing and not doing anything.
Absolutely.
And there's obviously the people that don't know, they just don't know. So,
but not knowing is a consequence of not trying to learn, right? So if you try to learn, however little it is, you will start to learn. Once you learn, then the thing that is in your hands, most things aren't in your hands. Remember that. Most things are not in your control. Even if you wanted to watch this on Zoom, it depends upon your laptop working, whether you had electricity in the house, whether Zoom was up or down. There are a lot of things that can stop you, even if you want to do something. But the one thing that's in your hands is the effort you put in. That's in your hands. So by putting in the effort, yes, there will be karma, there will be other reasons why things don't happen like you want them to or when you want them to. But if you keep going, at some point in time, they will happen. And so the idea of, the word we use is purshat, effort, right? You put that effort into everything that you do consciously with awareness, and what will happen is at some point that will become perfect, become better, but become part of you. And that will become normal. And you see this with people, for example, who go to the derasar, on a Sunday, and the one Sunday they can't go for whatever reason, they don't feel right because they haven't gone. It becomes part of their nature. And that's the idea, that you make it part of your personality, your conduct, by trying. If you don't try when you know you should, that is laziness. That is, again, a quality of the mind that you have, that one of the things it will always do is try and find a reason not to do something, which is why the first thing I talked about was discipline. The discipline is that if you have to do it, full stop. Even if your mind says no, even if you feel tired, even if you don't feel like doing it, just do it. And you will find over time, it will become second nature. I think at the moment people say 30 days. If you do something every day for 30 days, it'll become second nature to you. It's the same thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vijal. Kiran's got a question. Kiran, you've raised your hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to check. You know, when you say you gain knowledge and all this stuff, by learning, you change your way of thinking and everything. But there are times when people have got a lot of knowledge, but they've got still a lot of anger and
Yes.
all these things. Or also sometimes after we go and say Michami Dukram, and then the next minute you're walking out and you're doing something exactly what you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So obviously, is this your karma stopping you from doing all these things, or?
No. So it's a very good question. When you get knowledge, the one thing that decides what happens with that is whether that knowledge translates to conduct. When you start learning that this is right, or so if you learn, for example, that we shouldn't kill insects, but you still continue to kill insects, that means your conduct hasn't changed. All you've done is read something and memorized it. The idea of knowledge is to get your conduct to become better. That's the only purpose of it in reality.
Yeah.
Okay, that you have this and you start to put it into practice, and as you put it into practice, it changes your conduct, and that conduct changes who you are. You become a different person. So if you don't see that, it's a bit like, if you go to David Lloyd or your local gym 3 times a week, but you don't build muscle, the only conclusion is you're probably sitting in the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
The muscle is the outcome of going to that gym. Your conduct is the outcome of learning religion. It should change your conduct. The second thing is that, again, when you do Michami Dukram, when you do anything, when you do Pratikaman, when you do Puja, when you do Aarti, the defining quality of this is bhav, your intention, the feeling with which you do it. If you come and say Michami Dukram, that's it, then you walk on.
You're gone, yeah.
You can say anything in any language you like. It doesn't make any difference. You should bow your head and you should say it with true feeling and true emotion, that I'm really sorry that whatever happened, right?
Yeah.
That is the only way for it to take effect. If I come to the Derasar and thank you, and I'm out, yeah, I've done the ritual, I've gone through the process, it's had no effect. You have to have your mind engaged. So when I talk about awareness, the reason I talk about awareness and the impact of headphones and all these other things is because you have to keep your mind conscious of what you're doing rather than it daydreaming. Because how many people do you see that are driving that have their mobile phone, the radio is on, they've got other people in the car, and when they go from A to B, they can't even remember how they got there. They were in automatic.
But I think it's the same with the darshan, isn't it? When you're doing it, your mind is hovering so many other places.
And so what happens is that the impact of that is minimal. To maximize your impact, you have to do it with awareness, consciously. And you have to do it with power. And you can't do it with power unless you're consciously doing it. Because if you're just going through the words, you're not even thinking about what the words are saying anymore. You're not thinking about what, the meaning of what this is. And but if you do it with that, it's a very different experience, because you're then fully concentrated on what it is you're doing. And that concentration is the benefit you're going to get. So this is the big difference. And that's why the idea of awareness is actually very, very big in terms of getting your mind to focus on one thing at a time. This is why we do meditation, focus on one thing. And if you do focus on that one thing and you put your bhav and your intention into it, you're maximizing what you're doing rather than just going through a ritual for the sake of it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran. That was great. I've received a question from Hasmukh. He's asking, please, can you explain in basic terms Rudra Dhyan and Adra Dhyan, and what is the distinction between the two?
So Artha Dhyan and Rodra Dhyan are the two meditations that we do typically as lay people that have not moved to the third one, which is Dharma Dhyan. So Dharma Dhyan is when you do meditation that is related to religious things, okay? So you're thinking of a religious text, you're meditating on an idol of Bhagwan, you're doing something that is related to Dharma. But we are not there yet because A, our mind is not disciplined, and B, because we're still living in this sea of karma that we are trying to control. So the two things that we do, one is the idea of, us, and we feel sorry for us, that if this had happened, I wouldn't be suffering. If, my wife had won the lottery, we would have a bigger house. If this had, so you kind of feel sorry for yourself with all the potential things of, what if this had happened and what if that had happened? And it's largely looking backwards. The other one is about looking at other people outside and having anger or jealousy or, because of what you see or what you imagine, they behave like this because they've got so much money and they think no end of themselves. And so you're sitting there, in this meditation of actually having all these passions and emotions about other people and other things outside. So one is about you and feeling sorry for yourself, and the other is feeling, angry or jealous or hatred about other people. And this is what our mind does most of the time. This is the life it leads in. This is the soup that you've built. And in that soup, the thing to remember is everything you then think about is through the lens of all of those emotions and feelings. The issue with it is, and the reason it's so important to take control of your mind, is after a period of time of thinking like this, you start to believe it's real. And you live as if it was real. This person said this to me, he's so arrogant, he's, et cetera, et cetera. And then next time you see them, you actually believe that that is that person. He might just have had a bad day. He might have been thinking about something else. Something else might have affected him, but you're now living with your reality of what you believe. And then you start from there, this idea of like and dislike and so on. So you've built all this baggage that you take to everything and that you do. What, the idea of doing all these religious activities is to control your mind so that when it's thinking like that, you're strong enough to stop it. You say, this is not my thoughts, let it go. I don't believe in this. I'm better than this. And so once you start doing that, your actual ability have some control over your thoughts about what you're thinking, what you're doing, have some ability to focus, they all start to improve, and that starts the process. I hope that makes sense.
One follow-up question on that. So which one is Adra and which one is Rudra?
I believe Artha Dhyan is about yourself, and Rodra Dhyan is about people outside. So one is, because of what they said and what they did and whatever, you feel that that's the reason you suffer, because of other people, not because of yourself. And Rodra is when you look at other people and you have thoughts that are about them, negative thoughts, negative passions.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have any questions? You can put your hand up and then Mehool can answer them. We've got a few more minutes.
They don't necessarily have to be about the talk. If there's questions on other things, happy to try and answer them as well.
I don't think anyone else has got any questions.
Can I ask a question then?
Sure.
Which is
not directly to me.
Which is, have you found this useful? Do you think it'll help you in terms of, or do you think after tomorrow, you'll take a day or two and then you'll go back to where you were.
So you can, if you'd like to put a reaction, put your thumbs up, you can do that. And so just indicate to Mehool Bhai. I've already received a yes.
The one thing, you see, the one thing that you have to remember with this, and the reason I asked this question is it's not a trick question. The question is basically because, and I'm not saying any of this is easy in the slightest, but if you start to practice this, the one thing that you'll find in your life is, instead of happiness being the occasional thing that happens, and then in between there are large areas of, either neutrality or unhappiness. And as human beings, we're very good at forgetting those. When you ask somebody about, what did you do on holiday? They'll remember the 4 or 5 things that made them happy, but the rest of the time it was just normal and they forget about it. The same about their childhood, same about everything else. So we're very good at keeping memories of the things we want to and forgetting everything else. The idea with this is that you will become a person who is more happy than unhappy, right? Today, most people are probably more unhappy than happy because there are small amounts of happiness and the rest of the time it's either mundaneness or it's, they're not happy. The idea is to switch it over, take control of the things that are driving that unhappiness. And once you do that as a person, you just become an energetic, positive person that, has all of these things and you will find as a result, most of the challenges in life become easier and you start to do bigger and better things. So invest in yourself, become a better person, build qualities that are going to take you forward as a person, make you happier. And hopefully that will, you'll start to see all of those things as they happen. And the second thing I'll tell you is that what it then means is whatever you do it in a happy, conscientious way where you're putting all your energy in. It doesn't become, oh, I've got to do this, I better get it done. You do it, because you want to do it, and again, that changes everything. And I'll tell you, whether that's reading a book or doing the washing up, it doesn't matter. Your mindset to everything changes. And once that change happens, your life will, totally change. So this is why I think it's very important to understand this. Now, the other last thing I really do want to say is that what happens with a lot of these things is people learn religion and they learn the technical words and they learn the meanings and whatever. As I said before, the big thing is the conduct. If you do not have the conduct that matches your learning, you're sitting in the jacuzzi. And that is a way to remember it. Because why are you spending all that time, listening to me here, reading books, whatever, if it is not to become a better person, to change your conduct, to actually become a happier person? And that is the purpose of this. So think of it in that way, that it's not about learning big texts and big words and trying to remember this. This is about becoming a better, happier person. Did you get any more thumbs up, by the way?
I've got quite a few comments, feedback. It's been very useful, definitely raised a lot of feelings and emotions and very thought-provoking. One is not to force onto other people. It's an excellent talk. Thank you so much, Mehool Bhai. 2 fantastic practical talks, very useful. So a lot of praise here, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be taking what you've said on board, and hopefully, from the moment they log off the Zoom call, they will put everything into, put some small steps into.
I'll be very happy if that happens.
There has been one question though, if there is time, and we may have some time. But if you can go over the question that had come up from last week. Now, I don't recall what question that is. There was quite a few questions last week, but what we can do is, if you want to just revisit the YouTube video of last week's lesson, and then you'll be able to recall what the question was and the answer as well, hopefully. Oh, sorry. He said that, Mehool, you began with that question in today's session.
Oh, the question of whether kindness is a humanitarian thing
That's the one.
or a Jain thing. So the answer to that is actually very straightforward. That typically when we do things like kindness, and I'm using my words carefully, when we do things like kindness, we're doing them because we perceive that the people we're doing them to are in some way inferior to us, in some way less privileged, in some way suffering more, right? So, for example, you will, I mean, the news is plastered 24/7 with Israel and Palestine. And so if you think, I'm going to donate some money for a good cause and whatever, we see that as kindness. We see kindness as something that we do to a recipient, to a beneficiary. What I'm saying is the opposite. Become kind, regardless of the beneficiary. They don't have to be in a worse state than you. They don't have to be in a state where they are, less privileged or anything else. It becomes you. So whatever the situation, become kind. You see, I'll give you an example. So I was watching today, sitting on the train at the other end of the set of seats, there was somebody sitting there and he saw this woman come in with a bag and she looked a bit tired. He just stood up. She wasn't old, she wasn't infirm, and said, please have a seat. You need it more than I do. That's kindness. It doesn't matter, it's who you are as opposed to, so think about it like this. Humanitarian is you become kind to somebody. This Jain kindness is you become kind, full stop. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. That's your attitude. You're just kind. You're the sort of person who looks at every other person in equality and says, whatever I can do, I will do. That's it. That's the difference. You're not having to judge the other person or feel that you're doing it to them. And that is because of one thing, that in Jainism, it's very clear that what is in your hand, what you have control over, is your own effort. And those of you who don't believe that, just think about this, right? That if you've got kids, and I say that in plural, if you've got kids and you give them the same love, the same upbringing, the same education, if input equals output, why aren't they the same type of people? Why haven't they got the same brain capacity? Why don't they go to the same university? Why don't they get the same job? Why don't they have the same earning potential? You gave them the same things. They should happen. But you don't. The only thing you have in your hands is the effort of putting them in school, of keep saying to them, do your homework, etc., etc. You do all the stuff you should, but you have no control of the outcome. And that's the same thing with being kind to somebody. You have no control of the outcome. Whereas if you're, as a person, you're just kind, full stop, that is both the input and the output. The result is you're kind and the effort is being kind. That's it. And it doesn't matter. It's the right thing to do in any situation. And so that's what I'm saying, that, forget about what happens outside of you. Think about you and how you should be. If you should be honest, always be honest. Say the truth without fear. If you should be kind, you should be grateful, you should be thankful. All these things will improve you as a person. They'll make you fearless. If you think, if I say this, they won't like it and they'll get angry, you're living in fear. If it's the truth, say it. And that is the way that, you should start to become, because most people, I'll tell you, lead life on those two principles of either fear. So if I don't dress like them, if I don't look like them, if I don't eat like them, whatever, what will people say? And then the second is on the basis of what they believe other people will think. And you sort of live life in this thing. If you lead your own life, whatever happens outside, you will always be happy with that life. And in reality, what is the benefit out of competing anyway? And that's the way you should start thinking about this. So do it for you without worrying about who the other person is. Another question from Kieran.
Yeah, Kieran, well, let's hear from Kieran.
You're on mute, I think.
Oh, sorry. Hi, sorry.
That's okay.
Just a quick question. You know, the way you've explained things more in a practical, in an easy way, and I know that in most Jain classes, everything is quite complicated. Is there more lessons like this where things are sort of put in a simpler form rather than having to learn all the difficult words and this and that and everything?
I can't answer that. I don't know. But
Yeah.
what I will tell you, is that with all of this, yes, there are difficult words and technical words. The reason for that is that most of this is in a language that we don't speak anymore. So all those words are in either Sanskrit or Prakrit, right? We don't speak those languages. And those languages are typically at least 2 steps away from the Gujarati that we speak, if we speak that, and therefore it's difficult. But the reality of most of this is that it is this simple. You know, the complication comes because if you rely on people explaining it who want to do it from a technical perspective, then you must have the technical know-how. So most of the terms and the principles are simple. The way that they're constructed. Now, a small technical bit, I'll tell you why they're constructed like that. Most of what we read was actually initially written for monks to read, because it was thought that unless you follow this path, you know, there's not much you can do. Now, monks traditionally did not have anything that they were allowed to carry. They had their 2 pieces of cloth and their rajaran and that. So most of this is in poetic language, and it's poetry that you memorize. And when you sit in meditation, you say a verse and you think about it and you get the meaning. So not only is it in technical terms, it's in technical terms that are in a poetry, so a language that is even more difficult, and that's why people don't understand it. But as I said, I think before the class started, that if there are other things and other concepts that you struggle with, I'm happy to come back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing, Mehool, if you can just summarize just the words of the groupings that you were talking about earlier. So discipline, self-awareness, forgiveness.
Yes, so there are 5 of them.
Yeah.
And as I said, the purpose of these is to control the mind that sits between this body you have and this soul, okay? This interface. If you make this interface yours, then you're able to move from one to the other more easily. So the first is discipline, which means that you overcome laziness, overcome, you know, thoughts of not doing it, don't like it, don't want to do it, why am I being forced? Become disciplined. And that way, whatever you want to do, you will achieve. You don't have to then get permission of your mind as to whether you're going to get out of bed or not. You want to do it, you'll get up and do it. And again, think about any profession that trains people. If you're in the army, discipline is number 1. If you want to become a monk, discipline is number 1. Anything where you have to train people, the first thing you do is train them to be disciplined, okay? And discipline will give you results because you're then able to do whatever you want to. The second is awareness. Make your mind sharp and focused so you can focus on one thing consciously. It's not daydreaming whilst you're doing puja. It's not thinking about tomorrow whilst you're doing meditation or wondering whether you left, you know, the shower switch on or whatever. It's focused on what you're doing, full stop. That way you build power, you build, you know, this ability to put the right intention in. The third thing is become a positive person. Have a positive, happy outlook, because you have no idea, your senses are so limited, you have no idea of who or what the other person is actually saying or doing to you. But if you become that person, it doesn't matter. You're always happy, you're always positive, and everything else they say, it doesn't matter. If you can do those 3 things, you will start to develop the other 2 qualities, which is grateful for everything that happens. So if you look at this class, I will tell you honestly that I look at this class as something I'm grateful for because it helps me understand. By repeating this, it helps me understand this better. So I will become a better person. I don't know if any of you will learn anything, but I know that for me, it has a benefit. So I'm grateful. Okay, think of everything in that way. Don't say, oh, now they know how much knowledge I have. So what? Become a better person for yourself. And the last thing, forgive everything. Don't carry any baggage anywhere. Forgive everything. Be free. And if you can do those 5 things, you will find that your mind is in your control. You become a stronger, disciplined person. You'll achieve anything you want.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think it's time to end the lesson
Thank
now.
you.
I'd like to thank Mehool Bhai for the last two lessons. They've just been absolutely mind-blowing, and just from a personal point of view, it's really helped my last week and hopefully the rest of my life going forward, and my mindset will change. And I hope everyone else has taken on board what Mehool Bhai said as well. And it's just, yeah, it's from the feedback we've been getting, they really have, and very grateful for you to step in and take these classes. Just quickly, do you have any other, do you give any other lectures elsewhere?
So, yes, so first of all, thanks for having me. It's been great to be here. On Saturday mornings from 8:40 to 10 o'clock, we run a class. It's mainly the people who are the teachers of the Jain school in South London, which doesn't run anymore, plus others. So there's about 40 people. And what we do is we pick a book, go through it, read, the verse and so on, and then sit and discuss it practically. So it's a way of, making this a simpler, easier way to understand. And we just go from one book to the other. If anybody wants to join, let me know. I'll put you on the list and you get a link every week.
Okay.
And it's very simple, 15 minutes meditation, 1 hour of reading. And it's not only me, there are, others who do it as well. And it's done at a pace that makes it simple and practical and so on. And it's been running since 97, so 25 odd years.
Wow, okay.
Not that I've been doing it for 25 years, but it's been running for 25 years. But there are people who have, and they'll tell you that it's made their life so much better, understanding everything that happens to them. But yes, if anybody wants to join, you're more than welcome.
Okay. And it's on Zoom now?
It's on Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a couple of questions, sorry. Is it recorded? Can you?
Yes,
Yeah.
It is recorded. Drop me an email or send me your email, and what I'll do is I'll connect you with the person who administers the class. So if you want recording, and also what we do is we bring in interesting speakers. So there's there was one from the Chinmaya University on the Bhagavad Gita. There's one, Vinod Bhai Kapasi, is going to talk about how to build a temple and do pratishta. So we bring in interesting people in between, but the idea is, we go through technical books in a non-technical way.
Okay. That's brilliant. So we've got a Jainism class WhatsApp group. If you're on this WhatsApp group, what we'll do is we'll drop Mehool Bhai's email address, and if anyone's interested in joining this class on a Saturday, then just email Mehool Bhai directly, and he'll give you the details. Is that? Yeah. Or he'll pass on your details. So I'd like to end the session here now, but thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming the last couple of weeks and taking our class. We'll hope to see you all next week. I believe Ajit Bhai is back, but I think Sandip Bhai will confirm via WhatsApp. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.